Welcome to Gaming. I'm John Robertson, joined as usual by Stace Harmon, and we hope you're keeping safe and well and taking care of yourselves. This is now our 6th episode since we've relaunched, and we're still here, so a huge thanks for all of your support. It would be great if you could just take a moment, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, and if you've got any friends or family that you think might be interested, then it would be a big help for us in terms of getting in front of more people if you are able to share the podcast, the YouTube version of the podcast, anything with them. So yeah, do share and review if appropriate, and if you think that we're doing a decent job. So on to this episode then. So the new consoles are now upon us, and if you listened to last week's episodes, then you'll know that we weren't especially excited by the launch lineup, the offering of games that either the PS5 or the Xbox Series X, Series S have provided us. So this has gotten us to think about which launch games we actually have loved over the years and which we think stand out as the very best examples. So let's just go straight into it then. So Stace, when you think of great launch games, what do you think of? What comes to mind?
I think the two initial ones that come to mind are way back in the day. They're Tetris for the original Game Boy and Super Mario World for the SNES.
Old school.
You
have to go that far back to have a good launch game.
Well, I think that's probably when I was first aware of... That's my first memories of launch games, and in both of those are games that came with their respective consoles. So that helps a lot, obviously. And I was 10, around 10 when the original Game Boy came out, and so my memories of Tetris are getting up far too early in the morning before school to creep downstairs with my brother and play Tetris, take it in turns to play Tetris on the sofa, and then getting told off because we were getting up. We were getting up too early, and parents were like, "Nope, you can't do that." But that was a game that we had for a long time on the Game Boy before we got anything else, and more so with Mario World as well, Super Mario World. That was a defining, and that is a defining title, but it was a defining title in terms of my sort of game playing career, and that was another one that was, I had that game and nothing else on the Super Nintendo for a long time, because back in the day, I did a paper round, but it was like I wasn't going to buy a console, and I didn't even buy that console; it was bought for me. But I wasn't going to buy a console and additional games when a game already came with it, which I feel like is probably my parents speaking as well. We're not buying you a console and more games. You've already got a game. What do you need more games for? So yeah, that was a game that I played a lot for a long time and loved. Fortunately,
yeah, I think Super Mario World is probably my earliest. I was 6 years old when Super Mario World came out, so it wasn't like I was thinking, oh wow, what an amazing launch game this is. I was just thinking like, what an amazing game this was. Like, I wasn't really that aware, I suppose, of the concept of launch games. I don't think I had a SNES at launch either, although I'm not exactly sure. And it wouldn't have been mine. It would have been like the family SNES or whatever. So, but yeah, I'm the same. Like, Super Mario World is, it's a defining point in gameplay, game understanding, game appreciation, game obsession, whatever. I think actually it's a defining one to the point where it's not that I don't like it. It's not that I don't appreciate it or whatever. But I have a more, again, I wouldn't say negative, but a more standoffish opinion of the 3D Mario games ever since Mario 64, all the way through Mario Odyssey, because Mario for me is side-scroller. Like, it's a side-scrolling platformer. So the 3D Mario games are almost like a kind of subsection of Mario games for me, and they're not the primary subsection. They're in the side room.
I know what you mean. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think if you grow up and 2D Mario is what you have known, then that shift into 3D, well, it was exactly that. It was a shift from a thing that you knew into a new thing. And yeah, and I think I feel the same, because that Super Mario World, one of the things I loved about it was what it looked like. Like, I think for me that is almost the defining Mario visual
Yeah, definitely.
Super
That
Mario
shape
World.
of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the colours of him.
And the sound effects when he jumps on Yoshi and all it just
Yeah.
is sort of, I think, probably the defining Mario game for me. Despite the fact that I recognise that some of the later games perhaps are better designed or are technically more accomplished, it's hard to get past Mario World.
Yeah, I mean the side-scrolling ones, even the ones that they're releasing now, on the current Nintendo consoles, they're still very much that same game, but just kind of made sort of bigger and fuller. You know, they're not really designed so much vertically away from Super Mario World. They're kind of designed horizontally out. There's kind of still more stuff. All the core gameplay mechanics, all the core verbs are still exactly almost exactly the same, or they're based off of exactly the same foundation as those games. And I mean, you know, why? And obviously, there are Mario games before Super Mario World that Super Mario World is also, that you could say the same thing about. It's also based on those exact same things. But yeah, why change the winning formula? I suppose. Why tear that up if it's working so well?
So Mario World. I mean, again, that was a game that came with the SNES that I got. It came with that, and so that helped. Of course, that helped. If you have a game bundled in with a console, then a lot of people are gonna be exposed to that. More so even than if you have an amazing game that launches alongside a console, but people have a choice in whether they actually buy it. And
yeah, but it means that when you go to school, you know that everyone who's got a SNES or whatever, everyone can. You can engage in conversation. You can talk about what you played last night or this morning on that game with everyone. Like there's no one's left out. So it does create that.
Yeah, that's very true.
It creates the legend of it, the myth of it, the story, the collective story of it is much bigger.
Yeah. I guess that's like it's a I've got a SNES. Oh yeah, so have I. It's not a question of have you played Mario World? It's how far through Mario World are you, or have you found the secret stuff, or have you? Absolutely, it does.
And you'll always get that kid who lies after day one. So I completed it three times.
Mate.
It's like, what? No, you haven't
completed it, mate. Yeah.
What's the last boss then? So I don't want to ruin it for you. Okay.
So the Mario World stuff, and those ties to Mario as a game series. Mario 64 definitely was another eye-opening moment for me, and that was a game that I got with the N64. I think it probably had as big an impact in terms of this is redefining what's possible with a Mario game, and in some cases, particularly to do with platformers. But yeah, it's not the game that I immediately go back to when I think of a launch game. That would be Mario World.
Yeah. Because I can't remember if we got an N64 on launch. I'm not sure we did because we were such a big like PlayStation household. I think we got the N64 afterwards. The N64 launch lineup is really slim. Like it's got a tiny amount of games on there.
Turok was another launch title.
Yeah,
64, and I remember that for very different reasons. That was not a good game.
I played a lot of Turok.
The N64.
I remember. Yeah, I think so. I remember thinking it was all right, but you know, my tastes back then were less critical, I suppose.
It also launched. The N64 launched a long time in Europe, in the UK where we are. It launched a long time after, so it was kind of less of a big deal. Like the hype was less because they'd already had it in the US for 6 odd months.
6 months, then. Yeah.
It launched in a really odd
September.
Was it March?
Yeah, September 96. September 29th, 1996. It launched in the US, and March 1st, 97 was Europe.
Can you imagine now? You imagine launching a modern console now in March, but what?
I know people are up in arms that the PlayStation 5 is 1 week later in the UK than it is in the US. But yeah, at that point, like we were so PlayStation heavy, and even though maybe like I would have been more interested in the N64's Mario offering if it had been a 2D one. I remember seeing it, or I can't remember where, a friend's house or a shop or something there, that like a system running or a trailer running. and being like curious, but not being like mega excited about it.
Yeah.
And this was before I was really reading a lot of games journalism, games reviews. Like it was more just like word of mouth from friends and stuff. That's how just picking and choosing games.
Did you do that thing, just as a sidebar, did you do that thing where I remember Dixon's used to have consoles like available and running that you could go in and play.
Yeah.
And Saturday mornings it was like a free-for-all. It was just like this crowd descended on Dixon's and would just stand there taking turns playing these games that we probably had no intention of buying, certainly not that day, but maybe not even at all. It was just like a social thing that you did. Like,
oh, right. No, I don't think we ever did that. There was one time, there was a Toys R Us in Basingstoke, where I grew up, or just grew up just outside of Basingstoke, and the Toys R Us would go there. And I remember going there, I can't remember, me and my brother got dropped off by my mum, and then she was going shopping somewhere else, and we were just left there to play the PlayStations or whatever it was in Toys R Us for like an hour or however long.
Like free childcare.
And I remember getting there and there being this giant queue, like literally like 50 people. And I was like, we're like, what? Like this is what everyone does. And it turned out that there were people who were waiting in line because Tamagotchi got released that day. So we thought that we weren't going to be able to play the PlayStation or N64 or whatever it was, but it was fine because everyone just ran to the Tamagotchi aisle.
That's a whole
but no,
thing.
never went to Dixon's that
was a whole
as childcare.
Anyway, free childcare on a Saturday morning. So you were more of a PlayStation, more into the PlayStation. So was there a particular game? Like, did you get a PlayStation at launch, and was there a particular game from that?
I think. Well, so the PlayStation launched. Some handy spreadsheet here. So the PlayStation launched in September '95. In Europe and US. And I believe it was that Christmas 95 that we got the PlayStation.
Right.
And we got Ridge Racer and Total Eclipse Turbo on the PlayStation. Ridge Racer is obviously going to be known. Total Eclipse Turbo, probably less well known.
I have never heard of Total Eclipse Turbo. Did that become a different series, or did that just go away?
I think it died. Right. It wasn't a very good game. Even back then,
like
I knew it's not great. No, it was a like a spaceship game, and you were going like 3D spaceship game. You were from the viewpoint was behind the spaceship. You might have been able to have first person. I can't remember. Right. And you were going through like asteroid, like sort of rock tunnels. I think it was in space. I'm pretty sure it's in space. You're going through like rocky tunnels or avoiding asteroids and fighting enemies, picking up power-ups and stuff. It was absolute garbage. But I remember playing it loads because, because
that's what you
when
had,
you're
right?
like 10 years old,
exactly.
like it's not that you're going to go out and buy all the games. Like, that one's bad, so I'm going to spend another 50 quid or however much it was to buy games back then. 40 maybe, was it? I can't remember. But we still played it a lot. But it was really hard as well. I remember finding it really hard and just wanting to give up on it. But, like you can't, because what else are you going to do?
What else are you going to do? You play the demo disc that came with the PlayStation, I suppose.
Well, we did do that quite a lot as well.
Move the dinosaur's mouth and stuff. But Ridge Racer was the one that won out of those two games.
Yeah, Ridge Racer was the one. And that was a series that I carried on playing as well, all the way through, like Ridge Racer 5. Yeah, I mean, even talking about it now, like it's a shame that the Ridge Racer series doesn't exist anymore. I just thought Ridge Racer was so cool. Like as a kid, like it was easy enough to get into. I don't know if I really understood the concept of like a simulation racing game versus an arcade racing game. Yeah. Although I did when Gran Turismo came along. But yeah, I don't know. Ridge Racer was just so cool, and it had that like big feel of like a new, like a properly new generation, like going from like a SNES to Ridge Racer. It's like, whoa, like this is like really different. Like this is really like everything, the visuals, the speed of it, the number of other cars on the track, the music, just like the coolness. Like it felt like more grown up. It felt like bigger. It felt like a definitely like games like this is very different from like the SNES. This is very different from like F-Zero and other racing games we had played before on the SNES. Like like this, that had like the real kind of wow factor for me.
But see, I was no, go on,
and I just love racing games anyway. Like I don't know if that was the fast one. Maybe it was. Yeah, and so I'm trying to think if I was like biased towards racing games already at that point, or if that was kind of towards the start of my appreciation of racing
Yeah.
games. It's probably the latter.
Yeah, I was late to the PlayStation party. I think I was almost. It was probably the other way around for me, that I was more Nintendo. And I remember having a conversation with a friend about, like, he had a PlayStation. I didn't know this, and I said, "Oh, something like, oh, I see they finally released a good game on the PlayStation." And I think I was talking about Wipeout 2097. I don't think, because I think the original Wipeout was a launch title, and I didn't play that one. But we swapped. We did that thing. Did you ever do this at school, where we swapped consoles? So he borrowed my N64 and whatever games I had, the Star Wars, Mario, and I borrowed his PlayStation. And so my exposure to the launch games of PlayStation is very limited. But I played, I think he lent me Resident Evil and Tomb Raider or something. It was around that kind of time. So for a long time, the startup music on the PlayStation to me was Resident Evil. Like, every time I heard that, that's because that's basically what I played all the time. But yeah, I kind of skipped the early PlayStation launch titles almost completely. Just looking at this list, I mean, I played Rayman, Ridge Racer, but virtually none of the others, I don't think. So yeah, kind of missed out on some of those. Missed out on this Turtle Eclipse Turbo that I apparently
Turtle Eclipse Turbo. Need to go back and play. There's probably one person's got a view on YouTube with Turtle Eclipse Turbo full game walkthrough or something. Battle Arena Toshinden I played a bit of as well, because this was also an era in which well, just mention Wipeout for a second. So Wipeout never had at launch. When Wipeout 2097 came out, I think I asked for it for my birthday. I asked for it for some holiday or birthday or something. And I remember my parents buying me the original Wipeout, and I was just like, no. But because I think by that time, Wipeout, the original, was a PlayStation Platinum game, so it was only 20 quid.
Right.
And I think they must have thought like, oh, great.
That's good, yeah. We can get this Wipeout.
Amazing.
This one's half the price. So
cheap taste. I just remember just being so disappointed. Oh, no. Because I was reading like gaming mags and stuff by the time 2097 came out.
Yeah.
But this was also the era of like renting games as well. Like, we'd go to Blockbuster and rent games all the time. So like Tekken we played a lot. I know it didn't come out a lot, but it came out pretty close to launch. I'm trying to think of what other games we rented a lot. I can't remember. Fade to Black. Do you ever play Fade to Black?
Yeah, I played Fade to Black. Yeah.
Not a launch game, but yeah, a lot of games.
Yeah, that was the Another World follow up, right? Fade to Black. That was like I think that was the same people that did that. In that, what was that called? Is it rotoscoping? Is that what that's called? I can't remember, but yeah, that was I played Fade to Black quite a lot. So I didn't have a original PlayStation at launch, but a PS2 I remember buying day one, and I don't remember the launch lineup being great on that, but I remember buying Madden.
Oh, a couple of classics though.
Madden 2001, I guess it would have been at that point, and that was, I remember feeling like that was the start of a next generation. That was like the visual fidelity. At that time, it felt like, it's like watching people on the TV. And I mean, obviously it wasn't, but compared to what it had come before, that and far more stylized was Time Splitters. Played Time Splitters a lot.
Time Splitters was incredible.
Yeah, and I had both of those at launch. And yeah, that was probably the start of my sort of affinity for Sony consoles, which ran from PlayStation 2 and then sort of dropped off a bit at PlayStation 3. But there was there any launch titles for PS2?
I mean, Madden I think I'd already been playing at that point, and I'd also been playing the Blitz games. The NFL Blitz games, which were like much more kind of arcadey and just like giant hits and stuff. But I was already into the NFL a bit at that point, nowhere near as much as I am now. But me and a friend at school were really into it. Time Splitters, absolutely. That was just like the continuation of GoldenEye, really, wasn't it? Like, it was a lot of the same guys that worked on GoldenEye, worked on that, and the movement and stuff was incredibly similar to GoldenEye, the way it worked. But SSX as well. SSX is probably the one that I remember the most. I think that's the only, because we definitely got a PS2 at launch. So, or again for Christmas, like that year. Probably Christmas that year again. And it was always like me and my brother's joint Christmas present. Was that, and
Right,
SSX, SSX was the one. Because we're definitely keeping up with reviews and stuff at that point. And I remember a lot of the launch games getting really bad reviews, apart from SSX. It was like, oh, SSX, we've never really heard of this game. Well, this is a fast entry in a new series, a snowboarding game. It's like, oh, we played Cool Borders and whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, but do we want more? But yeah, SSX was absolutely amazing. Like, it was... Again, it's another racing game. And again, like, I don't know, I think racing games are often like a good way to a new console to show how powerful it is, or like what an upgrade it is, because they are so fast. They do take an enormous amount of processing power. You can have loads of different cars on the track. Like nowadays, you can have giant online races and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It was, again, similar reasons to Ridge Racer. It's like the brashness of it, the speed, the color, the graphical quality. Like, just, it's kind of that just like in your face kind of, like, I'm here, take notice of me, sort of persona that it had.
That only got bigger, didn't it? Because I skipped over the original SSX initially, and I think Tricky was where I came in to that series, and then went back and played the original SSX. But and that was exactly all of those things, the attention grabbing element of it, and how bombastic it was. Somebody should bring that back, that series.
Yeah, it was also I'd play it. It was also the I don't know if I was wholly aware of it at the time, but definitely looking back on it, it was the handling model in SSX. So like with all the tricks and stuff, that was nice, and the visuals. But I just remember the handling model, like it was both like stiff, kind of like as a snowboarder that you can't just turn on a penny. You have to like carve the snow up and whatever. But it was stiff, but also like it also very responsive at the same time. Like so, you felt like you could do things with the handling model. You could turn and whatever whenever you wanted, but it wasn't, like, to use like car terminology, like it wasn't like there wasn't any like oversteer on it. Like it was always very not rigid, but very predictable, but in a good way. So everything always felt like really fair in that game, like all the good times that you could set, and all the rivalries with players and stuff, like or AI. Like, I don't know, like it always felt like you weren't being robbed.
And I think that's a good example of one of those, like, where the handling doesn't need to be realistic as such. It just needs to be consistent, and it needs to feel right. And if you nail that, the realism side of it is not, for me, is not like I'm not that bothered about it. It's like, I want something that feels good, and I'm not like, if it doesn't feel good, I'm not interested in whether that's realistic or not. It doesn't, and that's how I'm not a huge racing game fan, but where I am sort of into certain racing games, or the ones that have appealed to me, tend to be the ones that I enjoy for how they feel, rather than, I have no idea how that compares to what it actually feels like to steer a XYZ car in real life, because I have no knowledge of that. But yeah, and I think that's a thing with the SSX. A large part of that series is that it's the feel of it, whether that's realistic or not, I have no idea, but it feels good. But then going back to kind of the new kid on the block around that same time was Xbox. So it was kind of the end of Sega's involvement in the console cycle, and the introduction of Microsoft's. And again, Xbox wasn't a console that I owned on launch. It was a friend had one, and we played Halo. I mean, I've only ever played the original Halo in split screen multiplayer. I've never played it single player. So my entire experience of what Halo is, the Combat Evolved, the first game, is entirely based on that, playing that campaign through on split screen multiplayer, and loving it. I mean, I remember, and I'd never been that. I liked Time Splitters, I liked GoldenEye. I don't think I'd never got the feeling of like this big sweeping cinematic presentation from a shooter before. And I remember Halo delivering that, and it being an amazing experience, not just the mechanics are tight, and I like the way the guns feel. It's like, this is like it feels like an event to sit down and play this, and it's like partly we're watching a movie, or we're tapping into that side of it as well.
Yeah, well, of launch games, that is a true sort of revolutionary title, I would say. Like, that brought, like, first person shooters existed on PC in a much bigger way.
Halo,
but yeah, but that really, Halo really brought it onto consoles in a big way. I know Time Splitters and GoldenEye were there before, but Time Splitters and GoldenEye is kind of gameplay wise very similar to each other. Halo took it to a whole new place. Like, as you say, this giant sprawling world in which the story was both original and really, really important and really, really interesting. And the story, not just in terms of like the narrative, but like, like how you can toy with enemies, how you can like do, perform like genuine tactics, and like how big the world was, and like all these spaces that they gave you to explore, not explore like an open world game, but to explore like, okay, what does this combination of this environment plus this gun plus this enemy, what does that allow me to achieve here? And you could, you can go about encounters in that game in one of numerous ways, and then that only gets more complicated if you add co-op on top as well. Like, I remember
the AI
definitely
felt far more robust. It felt like there actually was AI that you noticed. What happens when you stick a grenade to one of those little grunt things? So it runs around saying, "Help me!" And it reacts to what you're doing. And in GoldenEye, it felt more like a shooting gallery. It was more like these guys line up to shoot them. And in terms of just control design as well, if you go back and play the original Halo versus playing perhaps GoldenEye, which was a good sort of maybe 3 or 4 years before, but even so, play those two games, and I think Halo you'd have a much easier job of getting through again than you would GoldenEye. I imagine GoldenEye on that N64 controller with the one central analog stick, I think,
and the yellow buttons
and the yellow C buttons. That would be more of a challenge, I think.
Yeah, well, Halo basically set the standard for what has now just become first-person shooter controls, really, on a pad, on a control pad. And that's no small feat, that, because previously, generally, mouse and keyboard was considered the absolute, by a lot of people, not only the superior, but the only way to play a first-person shooter. And I know some people still feel like that, and I admit that, yes, I still am more accurate and still am better at playing first-person shooters with mouse and keyboard, but I've got no issue playing with a controller, like just like a couch console FPS. Like, totally, like absolutely no problems whatsoever with that. And it was Halo that kind of made that a possibility. I think Halo not made that a possibility, made it a reality. I think Halo is a massive contender for the best console launch title that there's ever been, to be honest.
Definitely fair.
Like even it's one of those games, like, even if you didn't play it, or even if you don't like it, it's difficult not to respect it. Like, it's done it has legitimately had a lasting, enormous impact on the landscape of video games. Like, it's one of the biggest. It's not quite as good as it was. I was going to say obviously, but it's hard to kind of retain that quality of innovation and just build quality over so many years in a single franchise. But I mean, it's still there. It's still like a top tier franchise. There's still people very angry or upset that there's no Halo to play currently already on Xbox Series X. So that's a launch game that is a superstar of the launch games.
So that was, I think Halo it's a superstar because of the game that it was, because of almost it kind of felt like it didn't matter what else there was available, because just looking at this list, like Project Gotham was another one that was a racing game that I thought was amazing and that I loved. But
I did quite like that.
But Halo stood head and shoulders above a lot of these games, irrespective of what else there was available. A game that
the Shrek game, the Shrek tie-in game, surely not.
Classic. It's got to be classic. A game that kind of was brilliant for a different reason, or that got more attention than perhaps it would have for a different reason, was Resogun on PlayStation 4. And there was a lot
brilliant game as well.
There was a lot of much bigger, much more high profile, much more hyped games, because hype, of course, became much more of a thing, and has become much more of a thing over the last few console generations. But Resogun was kind of just this diamond thing that I think was very popular. A lot of people played it, and it felt like you were discovering this thing, because I think I'm pretty certain it was digital only. I don't think it got
Yeah,
a
it
physical
was. Yeah.
So that was more. That was a thing. That wasn't like, oh, it was bundled in. That was a thing you had to go and find, or it was because of word of mouth and you looked it up. And it was. I felt like it was a similar thing with everybody playing that. But that was a thing you had to go out and find, rather than just it was delivered to you in the box kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and Housemarque have gone on to make absolutely amazing stuff as well.
Yeah.
They did Outlands before Resogun, but Resogun was the game that kind of introduced me to them.
Yeah, and it was my favourite PS4 launch. I mean, Resogun was.
Oh yeah.
I think there were others. You could look down the list, and there are others that you can say yes, they were very good. They were technically accomplished. They were, they had an impact in their series. But Resogun is certainly my favourite of the PS4 launch games.
Yeah, I mean that's the one that I played the most in my private time. By a distance. I mean, this was at the time when.
Do you mean outside of work? Is that what you mean?
Outside of work, yeah. So at this point, I was already, I was writing about games, so I was getting a lot of these games for free. I was getting console from Sony, and games were coming in for review codes or whatever, or features and stuff. But Resogun was the one I was playing outside of work. Like, I played Black Flag, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Call of Duty Ghosts, Battlefield 4, Killzone. Knack, Need for Speed Rivals. I think I hadn't played all of those, but and Call of Duty was fine. Killzone was okay. I've never really gotten a huge. I don't know why Killzone sort of sits in so many people's mind as a super impressive franchise. Really, I've never really loved it that much, but it's fine. Black Flag, I'd kind of gone off of Assassin's Creed at that point already. But yeah, Resogun with a much smaller budget, a much arguably smaller kind of ambition. Although I mean that's very arguable. Depends how you quantify that. Yeah, that was easily the game that was like, that's the game that I wanted to play. That was the game I wanted to be better at. That's the game I wanted to compare performance with against other people, and yeah. It's the one that I can still remember very well. I can still remember the levels, or some of them, in my mind.
Yeah, and it looked in its own way. It looked like a next gen game. I think that ambition thing is something. When the more ambitious, and perhaps some of that comes down to like photorealism. The more photorealistic you're trying to be, the more glaring it is when things don't quite work, or the more quickly things age as well. If you go back and look at the Assassin's Creed 4, for example, Black Flag, that's going to look, I imagine, an awful lot worse than Resogun. Resogun is its own thing that would still stand up, because it was a stylistic choice. It wasn't chasing, like trying to be, look how many polygons are in this person's face. It's created that way for artistic reasons rather than just a technical accomplishment. Okay,
so that's the PS4 then. So the Xbox One came out in that same month as the PS4, November 2013. Does the Xbox One suffer from the same, or did it suffer from the same kind of lack of, looking back on it, lack of thrill was the PS4 games?
I mean, a little bit for me. The game that I remember the most, or remember playing the most, or I have the strongest memories of, is Dead Rising 3 from that lineup. But that some of that is because I hadn't played a Dead Rising game until that point, so I didn't. It was sort of just a new thing to me, and I remember there being a lot of fuss made about how many zombies you could fit on the screen, and it was that one of those like flexing your muscles kind of games in terms of new generation. Let's just chuck a load of stuff on the screen. So I don't have particularly strong or fond memories of Dead Rising, but that is the game that I do recall the most of. Yeah, and it was more of an intellectual pursuit. Just like, let's have a look at these titles, more so than I was really excited to play. I don't know, Rise or
Rise. Yeah, I did play Rise though. I did quite like Rise. It was really short and really like to the point. And well, literally, there you go. There's my pun.
Yep. There's
but yeah, I did like Rise. I liked it more than the reviews and this kind of general. Yeah, I quite liked it. It's a bit of a guilty pleasure.
Something I have been more excited about in recent years was a couple of the Switch lineup games, and of course, in particular, Zelda Breath of the Wild. I mean, that's probably a standout Certainly, in terms of impact and in terms of from a changing what this franchise could be. I think in the same way that you talked in a previous episode about God of War doing a similar thing versus the older God of War games. Breath of the Wild, I think, for me, kind of changes my perception and my expectation of what the Zelda series can now be.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, once nostalgia, it's difficult for me to compare, say, Zelda Breath of the Wild to like Super Mario World, for example, because it's come along at such different times in my life. But I think, having thought about it, I think Zelda Breath of the Wild is. I'd probably put that above Halo, above Mario. I'd probably put Breath of the Wild as what I think is the greatest launch title of all time. I think if I'm going to be forced to pick one, then I'm putting that. And I am a Zelda fan. I'm as much of a Zelda fan as most other people. I'm not like a super Zelda fan. I'm not, I don't consider Ocarina of Time as the untouchable game of forever. I do like it, and I played Wind Waker a lot on GameCube, and I do like the Game Boy ones. But yeah, Breath of the Wild for me was just like, it was almost like finally it was like, oh, okay, like Zelda is actually, a triple tier 1 amazing superstar like game. It's like, okay, yeah.
I feel like the Zelda series has long been unimpeachable. Like it's sort of you can't say bad things about it, but this is the game for me that really backed that up. That really was like, actually, no, this is it's stunning. This is amazing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes across in it is just an incredible confidence in the game design. Like you really are like, aside from only a couple of things, you don't have to do anything you don't want to in the game. You literally, genuinely don't. And that's not like you have to go through the tutorial. I believe you have to go through the tutorial. You might be a way to bypass it, but I don't think so. And then you got to kill Ganon at the end. That's it. Like you don't have to do any of the other main missions if you don't want to. You can just go straight there and try to kill him, or like level up slowly by doing the shrines and other bits, and just go. You don't have to go to kill him. You don't have to interact with the other sort of main characters or whatever. And I think that's a super brave way to approach game design in general, but very much a Zelda game, which does have all these other principles built up prior to that. But you do have genuine freedom. Like it's an open world game, not like other open world games, not like Assassin's Creed or Watch Dogs or something. They're both Ubisoft games, but other companies do make the same.
Other open world games are available.
But you can literally just go and do whatever, or not do whatever. Like it's fine. Like and there are like towers in the game that kind of do resemble physically like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, when you have to like go up the tower again. You go and then like you go up a tower and you unlock more stuff on the map to do, basically. But it doesn't work like that in Zelda. You go up the tower and it does unveil more of the map. It like fills in the map, it fills in the topography of the map, but it doesn't tell you where anything are. Like it doesn't like
that associated checklist of stuff to go and tick off.
Like you've got to go and find all that stuff for yourself. And I think that's actually quite a subtle psychological, I'm going to say trick, but like skill, like piece of design going on there, whereby not putting it on the map, it can seem like, oh, it's fake, like they're just forcing you to go and explore in a fake way rather than telling you where to go. But I don't think that's true. I think that's not, I'm trying to understand the design deeply enough. So I think by not putting the icons on there, it makes the game feel more free, because it makes the map feel really big, because everywhere on that map might be something, rather than knowing, oh, actually the map's only those 10 things there, the rest of it is just filler space. Like that doesn't happen in Zelda. Like everything is worth exploring, because you legitimately don't know what you're going to find there.
Well, and exactly that, and it's exactly that for me, that when you've got a bunch of icons on a map, it becomes about the destination. You're just going to that thing to do a thing. When you don't, it becomes far more about the journey. It becomes far more about the exploration. And you just aim for a point, and I'm going to head in that direction and see what happens, rather than I'm going to get to that place as soon as possible in order to collect, collectible number 47 of 300. There's definitely there is a confidence, and there is a difference. It does make a big difference to how the game feels, because you're not
Yeah.
it's not as
Like,
tightly designed. It's not as constrained.
yeah, and I think in a way that makes it both daunting, but also really enticing at the same time. And it's a game that I play with a kind of different goal in mind, I suppose. Like, I'm not trying to just complete the game or get from mission to mission as quickly as possible. Yeah, it does kind of encourage a slower, not a slower pace of play, but a slower pace of accepting a slower pace of progression. Because like I'm not rushing to the end, and like that's not a game like you want to just be like, okay, I'm just going to defeat Ganon as quickly as possible and then just leave, just move on to the next game. It's something that you just play, and what happens, and like, yeah, eventually you're going to get to the end, hopefully. But it's okay if that takes 50 hours or if that takes 200 hours. Like, it's fine. The game, you'll have very different experiences. The person that plays 50 versus the player that plays 200 will have very different experiences, but they're both equally valid. Like, they're equally good. Like, they're equally equally allowed. Like, they're equally
I think from a critically, as objective as these things can be, objectively, I think Breath of the Wild is very, very probably the strongest, the best launch title that there has been in terms of the one that's had the most impact on me. I think, I have the same sort of challenge of separating nostalgia and how it felt and what my memories are of it, be it a more recent game versus an older game. But I think probably for me, the game that my favourite launch game ever is Super Mario World. It's that, for what it meant at the time, it was a very, kind of formative experience. It felt like in the same way that a Zelda game does, or many of these other games we've mentioned. Starting that game up, I remember this feeling of like, this is the beginning of an adventure. This is like the world is opening up in front of me, even though, almost ironically, it's very linear. Mario World, it's very like you go, you open up these paths. But it just, the world felt like it was opening up in front of me, and then finding later on that there was all this secret stuff that you could do as well was quite. And Mario 3 had really sort of had Super Mario Brothers 3 had really opened people's eyes to that, I think, in terms of a Mario game. But Mario World, it just felt more open. It felt like there was more to explore, and it was, I think, put on the spot. Similarly, if I had to pick one. My only caveat that for me it would be my favourite launch title is Super Mario World, rather than perhaps the best. I think, Breath of the Wild perhaps in that respect, but certainly my favourite is Mario World.
I don't think that can be argued with, and I think it's interesting as well, because when you were talking, like, if the question was slightly changed and the question was if only one of these games could exist that you've spoken of, then maybe Mario Worlds is the one that I'd want to exist. I don't know.
So it's then looking ahead, looking not even ahead now, but we're there. Are there any games, we touched on it before, but are there any games that you are looking forward to playing, or is there, what's the game you're most looking forward to of the Series X/S and PS5 titles? Is there one that you can pick out
of the launch day ones?
Yeah, of the launch day ones, this is what I am, for whatever reason, be it just...
Probably Demon Souls, probably. Okay. And again, it's the same thing with Demon Souls. It's the same thing with any Souls game or any Souls-like game for me. It's, okay, this is going to be the one where I'll finally master it. And I know that I'll play it, and then like 3 days later, I'll be like, I'm never playing this again.
Bounced off it.
Like, I loved it. Like, but also with Demon Souls, it just looks so good. The new footage of it, oh my God, like, it just looks phenomenal. It looks absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's not. I did not expect you to say that, actually, because I know you're.
Well, I mean, it's a short. It's a list. Yeah, I mean, it's a list that doesn't. It's not doing a huge amount.
But yeah, so of those
in general,
and I think so for me, for a very different set of reasons probably, but the Astrobot game that comes with the PS5 is the one that I'm most looking forward to playing. I don't expect for a second it will be the one that I play the most of, or that I'll put the most hours into, but it's the one, perhaps
everyone will have it.
Yeah, everybody will have it, absolutely. And I feel like it's one of those that kind of embodies, I mean, it, at its if you're going to level an accusation at it, you could perhaps say, well, it's a glorified tech demo if you're being incredibly unkind. But that's part of the reason that I'm looking forward to playing it the most, is to see how it utilizes, how it shows off the new stuff with the controller, the DualSense controller, and what that might mean for future. If it just inspires some developers to start playing around with this idea and seeing how things can be used, and not just seeing how it can be used, but the effect when it is used in a certain way, then that I think will be valuable. And that's that's what I'll be putting on, I think, first. Once the PS5 arrives, I'll be loading that up to see how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be playing it, of course. After I've bounced off Demon's Souls, I'll probably play that until Cyberpunk
It'll be a nice
up.
little, it's a nice little sweetener, I think, in between Demon's Souls sessions. It's to play Astrobot.
Okay, so there's our best launch games of all time. A lot to choose from, but Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Super Mario World on the SNES are the two that we've picked out, both Nintendo games. That wasn't planned, so I actually just realised that. So thanks for listening. Do follow us on Twitter, do follow us on Instagram, Facebook. That's at Indie by Design across all of those platforms. And again, if you've got a moment to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and share with your friends, and that'll be fantastic. But otherwise, we'll see you again next week.